The Gospel of Mark, as we've talked about before, was the first of the Gospels that was ever put down in writing, the first of the documents to start being passed around by the earliest of those that we started calling Christians. It's remarkable in its bluntness in many ways, and its simplicity in other ways. It's also remarkable that the other two of the synoptic Gospels, that would be Matthew and Luke, draw so many of their stories from this Gospel. So you can see how it had influenced persons already when those writers decided to do it. It's also interesting that in its simplicity, we can see how the writer of the Gospel of Mark was, in a very tentative way, let's say, trying to give a little bit of history to the present reality of people's following this Christ person, okay? Just like the Jews, when the book of Genesis was finally written, centuries after it had already been a people, already had the law that they were following, because people need some sort of a history. So hear these few verses today, knowing that that's a little bit of what's going on, okay? Because this guy wasn't there when this supposedly happened, okay? Now, we've already heard in the Gospel of Mark how it doesn't begin with some birth stories. It just starts with the baptism of Jesus, remember that? And the beginning of his public ministry. So Jesus has left from his baptism, and this is what happens next. As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Simon's brother Andrew casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for humankind." And immediately the two left their nets and followed Jesus. As Jesus went a little further, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and James' brother John, who were in their boat mending the nets. Immediately Jesus called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men, and they followed Jesus. Here ends the reading of Scripture. May God grant its meaning to our hearts and our minds. If the writer of Mark's Gospel lived in today's world and was trying to write some sort of a historically based novel, and he sent something like that to a publisher, what do you think would be the response from the publisher? Use your imagination. You're the publisher of a book, and of course, as a publisher, you want to sell the book and what? Make money. So you want to sell a bunch of books. So that's the way Mark chooses to continue beginning this historical novel. What would you tell him? Why? Oh, maybe we don't know that quite. It's even worse than that in a publisher's eye. Think about it. What are the earliest stories about the founders of our country like? Is it some simplistic story about them, or don't we know all kinds of facts about their lives, and they're blown up to be these superhuman people? Don't we like stories about people? And we want to know all there is to know about them. We want to know their warts and their strengths and their weaknesses. We want to be able to either adore them or even identify with them. So the publisher would go back and say, you got to fill in more about these guys if they're going to play a central role in this story. People aren't going to want to hear something straightforward like that. They want to know more. Well, my people, we don't know anymore. What do we know about these first 4 disciples that are called by Jesus to follow him? What do we know? We know they're fishermen. We know they're brothers. Pardon? Yeah, well, we know the name of two of them, yeah. Well, we don't know that yet, do we? Actually, a little bit further along, you find out that at least Simon is married, not because you meet his wife in the story, but because he goes to his mother-in-law's house to be fed. So I think if you have a mother-in-law, you have to be married, don't you? I think. Anyway, but no, that's all we know is they're fishermen. We know something a little bit different too. The first time, the first two brothers who are called, remember who they are? Simon and Andrew, okay. What are they doing? Do you remember? Yeah, so they're in their boat casting the net. They couldn't be very far from the shore. They're probably fishing for what? Bait. Okay? So, or if not bait, then just not very big fish. But anyway, they're fishing. How many of them? In the boat. Now, that's important. And so they immediately pull up the net, throw it down, must row to shore, and they come and follow Jesus. No more questions asked, okay? Now, the second set of brothers, now what are their names? James and John. Well, what's their father's name? Everybody knows this one. Zebedee. Yeah, that's easy to remember, isn't it? How many people, now they aren't fishing, are they? What are they doing? Mending the nets, yeah. One of the tiresome things about being fishermen. But how many people are in that boat? There's more than three. They're in there with their father and who else? Hired help. It's a bigger boat. Has to be a bigger boat. Has to be a bigger fishing operation. Therefore, they're probably more well off, don't you think? There's more money coming in. And it seems that the reason that these two brothers are fishermen is because their father's a fisherman. Got a good thing going, so they're going to keep the family business going. It almost sounds like a 401k waiting to be. Really, they're going to just keep it up and keep on going. It's a source of security. Maybe for the first two brothers, it was just a sense of, if we don't catch some fish, we don't eat. But we have a little bit of difference now already at the beginning. Two different sorts of sociological classes are called to follow Jesus. But still, what does it appear Jesus does to get them to follow him? The first two, we know supposedly what he said. What did he say? Follow me and I will make you fishers of people. Humankind. Now, I don't know about you, but to be honest, I think if I was one of those guys in the boat, my response would be something like, yeah, right. What's going on here? Yeah, what are you going to use for bait? Yeah. Fishers of humankind, of people. What does that mean? What does that mean? Number one, they didn't know, did they? They couldn't know. How can you know what that means? Why did they follow him? Why did they follow him? We could make it a glorious story, and maybe it is, just his charisma was such that he was like a magnet. And they just thought, oh, wow, we got to do this. Or it might be that the truth is, fishing is a very difficult profession. Think of that. It really is. You're at the mercy of the weather, at the mercy of the fish and their patterns that you can't figure out where they're going to be on what day or anything like that. You're at the mercy of the nets. If they break when you're pulling the fish in, you lose the whole day's catch. All these kinds of things. It's dirty, it's smelly, and you don't make a lot of money usually, unless you have a bigger boat and more people. So maybe they just thought anything's better than this. Let's just be honest. Maybe that's what they thought. That doesn't make for a very good story, does it? But they left, we know that, and followed him. And he keeps walking, and he evidently stays by the shore because now he comes upon some people who have pulled their boat up on the shore somehow, docked it anyway, and they're just mending nets. A bunch of them this time. but it says that there were two brothers, and he called them. We don't know what he said. Let's just assume he said something along the same lines as he said. And they go. They leave their father right in the boat. Now, the father isn't protesting in this story, is he? Yeah, my response is, right, yeah, right. His two sons, who are going to carry on the family business and maybe enable him to retire a little early, they're leaving. They're just going. And they aren't, they just quit mending the nets and everything. This story is fraught with all sorts of problems, isn't it? For us. Why would you say these people left and followed Jesus? So maybe it's for no reason more than that. They just didn't like fishing. Maybe they had no idea how long they were going to be following, but they thought, well, we'll give it a couple hours, today or something. We don't know, do we? Now, because we think we know most of the rest of the story, we know they stayed with it. But this is how it started. What are we supposed to learn from this? Is it necessary, if we're really going to be followers of Christ, that we have to quit our jobs? Do you think that's what this means? I tried, and look what happened to me. Maybe I'm not a Christian. I don't think it's that. Do you think it's that they want to say, if you're a Christian, you should quit your job? No. We know in the book of Acts, as a matter of fact, that one of the amazing things about the early Christians is that those that did have jobs and brought home money when they got paid or when they sold their goods or something like that, threw it into a pool so that everybody in the Christian community was able to survive together. So we know that having a job was part of being a Christian for some people. If you didn't have a job, you couldn't very well quit it either, could you? So that's not the point of this. So if we're going to make something of this, we're going to have to maybe think a little harder for each of us in today's world. They went with Jesus, and what do we know that they were leaving behind? What were they leaving behind? Security. Security in the form of something they knew. It had become a regular part of their lives. They knew how to do it. They knew where to go to do it. They knew it would be there for them to do. And they just did it. Whether they liked it or not, at least it was something that brought home some money, some security, and enabled them to do things. That's what they left behind, the certainty that had come to them from the regularity of their jobs. So let's say that maybe, at least for today, that's what we need to wrestle with. Moving forward always requires leaving something behind. Boy, you should see in our marriage, we've had to move a bunch of times. And it's been because of me, taking a church here and then going to another church there and things like that. So we've moved a bunch of times. And how many of you have moved more than once? Okay, so you should see the woman I'm married to the months before we move. Goodwill is so happy that we exist because she leaves everything behind she can, let me tell you, because we're going to something new, and the rule has become, you've heard that rule, if you haven't used it in the last year, then obviously you don't need it and get rid of it. Well, it's more like the last month with her. But seriously, it's worked out well, hasn't it? It's worked out well. So, but it is true. Think about it. It's probably a truism about life that if you move forward from some place, from something, from some situation, you can't take everything with you all the time. You got to leave things behind. Sometimes that's rather hard, isn't it? I was raised in a dysfunctional family, but I still remember the day my parents had driven me all the way out to New Jersey and left me off on the campus. And I asked them to leave me off on one end of the campus because it's kind of pretty and I had a long way I could walk back to my dormitory. dormitory. And I still remember watching them drive away. You know, dysfunctional and everything. I still had a place to sleep with, you know, a roof over my head and stuff like that, and awful food, but at least it was food to eat. So, you know, it's leaving behind and moving forward is not always easy. Most of the time, things or persons or situations that we have to leave behind, we've usually put some effort into making those happen, haven't we? Jobs, families. I mean, it's a job. It really is. And I don't mean this facetiously. It's a job to live in a family. The hardest thing any two human beings can do is live under the same roof together. So when you have 3 or 4 or 5, wow, it's tough. So you've put some effort into just not killing each other for so long that it's kind of hard to leave it. It's kind of hard to leave it behind. Seriously, it is. So moving forward, if it always means leaving something behind, because it's hard, it's also the fact that sometimes we just don't do it. We stay with things the way they are because it feels better. It feels more secure. We know it. We've invested in it. Whether it's good or not doesn't matter, just because we don't exactly know where we're going or how we're going to get there. Maybe that's what we have to realize today in this lesson. That if we really believe, each of us, that we want to say yes to Jesus, saying, come, follow me. If we want to say yes to that, it's going to cause us to leave some things behind. Now, nobody could sit here, I don't think, I know I can't sit here and tell you what each of you has to leave behind or has left behind, or tomorrow you're going to have to leave behind, or I don't know. But whenever we go forward into some place we don't know where we're going to end up, along some path that even the GPS can't tell us about, whenever we do that, we better be ready to be a little bit lighter on our feet, maybe. Not have so much baggage, not have everything and say, okay, I'll go forward, but I have to take everything and it has to stay the same as it always has been. So being a Christian means that we're willing to go forward into life in a way that is guaranteed to be different, in a way that is guaranteed to make us have to leave some things in our life behind because they no longer work in this new journey. Is this ringing a bell for any of you at all? I know that I've liked going on trips that we've never been the place before, but boy, I've got my GPS. And it's turned on, and I finally found a different voice because the voice just bothered me. But now it's this guy whose voice isn't as bad as the woman's voice. But anyway, but you know what inevitably happens, don't you? You get near the place you're going, and they've built new roads. Has this ever happened to any of you? Yeah, and the GPS doesn't know it, so it tells you to turn right, and there's this big sign saying one way the other way. And you think, uh-oh, I don't know how to get where I'm going. Well, I thought everything was fine. I had a car with good tires on it, but I had my GPS. It was going to show me the way, and it didn't know either. But we got there eventually. You know the best place to go and have this happen to you? Boston. Go there sometimes. Every street in Boston is one way the wrong way. It really is. I used to take a member of the church I served in Vermont over to the Eye Institute in Boston. He was part of an experimental thing. He was functionally blind. But anyway, and the first time I took him, I had these directions. And I'm on Interstate 90 right into downtown Boston, and there it is. It's this monstrous big building. It says, you know, Boston or something, Eye Institute and everything like this. So it seemed pretty easy. All I got to do is get off the ramp and the next ramp and go there. I didn't get there for half an hour because I got off the ramp and I thought, it's back there, and there was no street going that way. So I had to keep going that way, and I didn't know where I was going. And honest to goodness, that's the way it was. That's the way it can be. Following a person who no longer we can touch or have right in front of us. We can't even complain to very well. We can't make our own suggestions about, it'd be a little bit easier for me to do this. The only thing we know about our journey is that along the way, we have at least two things that we know we're going to need to do. We're going to have to practice self-giving love because that's the way that we go on the journey. That's always the case. We don't know what that might look like. We don't know how much that might cost us. But at least we know that much, that that'll be the right thing to do when we come face to face with a need, with persons. And we know that if we see injustice, we've got to speak out. We've got to say this is wrong. We've got to make an attempt to bring justice to that situation. We know those two things. Is that enough, you think? Is that enough? What kind of a journey would you call this? We don't know exactly where it's going to take us on any given day or week or month or year. We don't know exactly who we're going to meet on that journey, exactly how the needs are going to face us, that we're going to try to give of ourselves to meet those needs, give new life to people. And we can be certain that from time to time we're going to find injustice in this world, and we're going to have to find some way to speak out and find some way to try to right those wrongs. That's all we know. We know to do it lovingly. We know to do it honestly. That's all we know. What kind of a journey is that? Can you think of a good word to say about it? Anybody? Journey of faith, yeah. Faith is the only thing that's going to get you going. It's an adventure, isn't it? So suddenly this historical novel is turning into some kind of an adventure that you can't write ahead of time. You can only write it after the fact every day. Here's the thing we need to ask ourselves, because, boy, in just a couple weeks, this new beginnings that we're going on is just going to explode. We're going to be either starting out on this journey full force and all of us together, or we aren't. And that's the kind of journey it is. We know some things that we believe we've been called to do. We're going to be doing some tutoring. And then we're going to see if that doesn't lead us to some kind of food ministries, meals and community meals and things like that. Those, we kind of have an inkling about that, but the one thing I can guarantee is nothing's going to be perfectly easy and turn out just the way we think it's going to. That's what it's going to be. So I'm suggesting that today's scripture, by saying, every time you go forward, you got to leave something behind, is really important for us. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. That wouldn't be fair. That's the kind of journey being faithful is. Being willing to follow in the way of Christ, even though there's no guarantees where it's going to take you or me or us together. What we're going to find on that journey, and what it might cost us in the sense of time and effort and loving and being patient. Oh, I don't want to do that. Those kind of things. We don't know. So the question is, are we willing to go on the journey? It's a good thing those 4 brothers were willing, and a bunch of other ones later, or we wouldn't even be able to be here talking today. It's a good thing they did, and they had a whole lot less to go on the journey with than we do. But you think about that. Are we willing to leave some things behind to go forward? Are we willing to go on this adventure, trusting that the way of Christ is the way to live? Those with ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Amen.